ready, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We're going to start with a moment of silent reflection for our first responders and members of the armed forces. That'll be followed by an invocation by Dr. Wayne Smith, headmaster at Masters Academy of Vero Beach, and then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Peter O'Brien. If everybody will please rise.
Our gracious and loving, ever-present, all-knowing Heavenly Father, we bow in your presence here this morning, Lord, in the presence of these men and women that have been elected and appointed for such a time as this. We live in interesting times, Lord. We live in challenging times. And these men and women who make decisions for this community carry a heavy load. And I ask for your guidance and your wisdom to be bestowed upon them today. I pray that you would guide their thoughts and their deliberations. I pray that you would guard their hearts and their minds, and that you would enrich this meeting here this morning. May the decisions made here this morning, Lord, not only reflect what is good for this community, but in a wider sense, what is good for the state and for this country. Guide our chairperson, guide our sheriff, guide these commissioners, guide our leaders, Lord, we pray. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item is additions and deletions. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Yes, Commissioner Solari.
Madam Chair, I'd like to table my matter 14E1 because there are evidently some ongoing negotiations between Graves and Indian River County, and they may go for another couple weeks, and I don't want to interfere with that at all. So if I could, I'd like to table it until either a special call meeting later in July or the meeting in August.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other additions or deletions?
No.
No?
Madam Chair, move approval as amended.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Flesher with a second by Commissioner Zork. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There is no proclamations or presentation, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Lots of minutes. The special call meeting of February 25th, the regular meeting of April 21st, the regular meeting of May 5th, the regular meeting of May 12th, and the special call meeting of June 4th.
Move approval of minutes that you've read into the record.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien and a second by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There is a few informational items. Just note for our residents that the residential paper shredding event will be held on July 18th, and I know that's always something that's very popular, so mark your
Actually,
calendars.
Madam Chair, I think maybe Sue has maybe a little quick presentation on this, if you don't mind.
Of course, that would be awesome.
Great.
Thanks, Sue. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sue Flack, Solid Waste Disposal District. So you are right, on Saturday, July 18th, the Solid Waste Disposal District, partnering with Waste Management and Southeast Secure Shredding, will be hosting a free residential paper shredding event. The event will take place at Southeast Secure Shredding, which is located at 3910 US 1 from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Residents are allowed to bring 3 boxes or up to 35 pounds of material to be shredded and recycled at no cost. The event's going to be limited to the first 800 vehicles, and in observance of social distancing requirements, PPE will be worn by all workers and volunteers, and residents will be informed to stay in their vehicles while driving through. We know it will be a great event, so make sure everybody please turn out.
Thank you.
And Sue, just so everybody knows, there's a $5 charge per vehicle, but Waste Management is picking up the majority of that cost, so there's very minimal cost to the Solid Waste Disposal District.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to, although I have my disagreements sometimes with Waste Management, I like to give them credit when credit's due. And so they're stepping up to $8,000 to help cover this event. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item is consent. Does anybody need to pull anything from the consent agenda? Anybody from the public wishing to pull anything from the consent agenda? No?
Move to approve consent.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Zork. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is going to be constitutional officers and governmental agencies. This is the 19th Judicial Circuit Award of the 2020-2021 Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Treatment Fund and designation of Indian River County's problem-solving courts as a chosen program recipient. And I believe, yes,
Through the chair, if I may, I know Judge Mentz wanted to join us this morning, but she was not able to. I believe Judge Cox was going to try to join us on our YouTube opportunity, but I'd also be happy to speak to the item if Judge Cox is not able to join us this morning.
is Judge Cox on?
Okay. Well, I will kick it off, and if she joins, that'd be great. And Judge Mentz apologizes for not being here this morning. She had something else that came up. As of May 30th, or 31st, 2020, there is a $296,000 in the county's alcohol and other drug abuse trust fund. The 19th Judicial Circuit is requesting that the board approve the Indian River County problem-solving courts to be a recipient for some of the funds, and the request is up to $50,000. That would be used for treatment, testing, evaluations for those participants who are indigent, who are in our various drug problem or our problem-solving courts, which includes the Veterans Court, Drug Court, Mental Health Court, and the like. Simply stated, I think in the last year, there was approximately $25,000 that went into the fund and only about $800 that was used. A lot of that decrease from the previous year was due to COVID interruption of the program, but certainly I know that the judges hope that this program continues to move forward. With that, I'm just available for any additional questions about the request, and hope if Judge Cox comes on that she be allowed to speak. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, any questions?
Just, Madam Chair, I think these programs have been a great benefit
Yes.
to our community. I've attended several of the graduation ceremonies, and it's very moving when you hear these people's stories and then what they've overcome, and then to be able to graduate from the program and to get back into the mainstream of society. So I would be very pleased to go ahead and make the motion that we grant the request for the up to $50,000 for the from the trust fund.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Is there any discussion? Anybody in the public? Judge Cox is on. Okay. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
All right. We have a public notice
Yep,
item?
we have a public notice item. Just simply put, we have a notice of a public hearing. This will be on July 14th, 2020, here in the chambers. This will be to consider an ordinance to amend section 1100.13 of chapter 1100, which is the economic development ad valorem tax exemption. The ordinance will also contain the referendum language for the extension of the tax, the economic development ad valorem tax exemption. This will be legislative in nature, and again, this will be a public hearing here on July 14th. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to county administrators matters. The first item is review of the 2020 Florida legislative session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Sullivan, Legislative Affairs and Communications Manager. wanted to provide you all with an update of the 2020 Florida legislative session. It seems like just yesterday. Some of us were in Tallahassee, and everyone was dealing with what the legislature was going to do this year, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, so time is flying. So just wanted to walk through some of our public policy agenda that you all set last fall. We'll start with the budget, an overview of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. The total budget for the state was $92.2 billion. Last week, the governor signed the budget and made about $1 billion worth of budget cuts to that, many that came in as a result of the constraints that COVID-19 is going to put on the state's budget. Some highlights: over $2.2 billion was specifically earmarked for projects within the Department of Environmental Protection. This includes $322 million for Everglades restoration projects, $160 million for targeted water quality improvements to achieve measurable nutrient reductions in key waterways throughout the state, $25 million for cost-share grants for water quality improvements, including septic conversions and upgrades and other wastewater improvements, and a dedicated $25 million for improvements in the Indian River Lagoon. Now, the SHIP funding, the affordable housing funding, was vetoed last week by the governor. However, that money reverts back to the Sadowski Trust Fund, so there is still the opportunity next year to go back and have that money included in the budget. And additionally, there may be some opportunities for some of that funding to be recouped by CARES Act funds. I believe last week or the week before that, the governor announced $250 million in CARES Act funds toward affordable housing in the state. Now, the details of how those funds might be available and exactly what they may be able to go for is still in the works. So that's something that we will continue to monitor and determine whether there's any opportunities for affordable housing funds from the state to come down to Indian River County. We had one specific appropriations request this year, and that was for the North Sebastian Septic to Sewer project. We received $750,000 in the budget, and that made it, that survived the veto pen of the governor, which we were very gracious for. This project will construct a gravity sewer system to service an area that abuts the Sebastian River adjacent to the Indian River Lagoon. Approximately 114 parcels will connect to central sewer services, and it will provide a positive benefit to the Indian River Lagoon by reducing an estimated 3,534 pounds per year of total nitrogen and 570 pounds per year of total phosphorus from entering the environment. The total project cost is approximately $6 million, and that's $4.35 million for the sewer portion of the project and about $1.55 million for the water portion. Now, going on to some substantial policy measures that were passed this year that affect us. Senator Mayfield carried the Senate Bill 712, which is the Clean Waterways Act. This was a very, very comprehensive piece of water legislation, water policy legislation, which also implemented recommendations from the Blue Algae Task Force. Of specific interest to our county and what was included in our legislative agenda was language that was placed into this bill that preserves a local government's authority to implement and maintain a moratorium or ban on the land application of biosolids. If this legislation hadn't passed, or if this language hadn't been placed in legislation, our authority to implement or to extend that moratorium that you all did at the last meeting would have been repealed by the Florida statutes. So this was a very important piece of legislation for us, not only because of the comprehensive water quality aspect of it. I believe it's about 150 pages of pretty dense reading that Commissioner Solari has been studying up on. But this biosolids language was very, very important to us.
Ryan, that's what I was going to ask. Was that known as the Solari Amendment?
If it's not, it should be.
It should be, right.
The Clean Waterways Act also creates a wastewater, well, first, the Clean Waterways Act transfers regulation of on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems from the Department of Health to the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a substantial change. And it also creates a wastewater grant program within the Department of Environmental Protection that requires a 50% local match of funds. It's kind of my inclination that the legislature seems to be going away from or wanting to get away from specific member projects that everybody puts in for septic and sewer projects, and it seems like they want to allow the Department of Environmental Protection to kind of oversee this and to partner with local governments when they're seeking funds for those types of projects. That is just kind of the theme that I've gathered in some of the decisions that they make. And within this grant program, some of the projects that this money could go toward are projects to upgrade on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems, projects to construct, upgrade, or expand facilities to provide advanced waste treatment, and projects to connect on-site treatment and disposal systems to central sewer facilities.
Madam Chairman, Brian, on the transfer of the septic permits and stuff to the DEP from the Health Department, my understanding that still has to kind of go through a process where they actually make the rules for it or something.
Yeah.
Can we push to keep like septic system repairs with the Department of Health, so that's a local issue? I understand, you know, if it's a new septic system coming in, DEP wants to look at the big picture and that takes more time, but when you're building a new house, there's more time involved. But I think if someone's septic system backs up, they need to be able to come right down here locally, get that permit, and then go fix it, because, I mean, you don't have a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to deal with DEP down in Palm Beach. So if we could, and if the board kind of agrees, I think keeping, you know, the emergency repairs and repair permits with the local Department of Health, and then new septic systems can go to DEP is how I would like to see that work out, if that's something we can work on.
Yes, definitely. And those were, you know, some concerns that were raised with the transfer of these duties and responsibilities. You are losing that local aspect. You know, instead of having the health department right across the street from us right now, West Palm would be the nearest branch for DEP. So yes, that's definitely something that we'll continue working, whether it's by administrative rules or whether there's any potential ability for legislative changes to clarify and to simplify that process.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Another bill that was passed this year amends the county boundary between Indian River County and St. Lucie County. As you all remember, this moves a piece of property on the east side of A1A wholly within Indian River County, and it moves a development on the west side of A1A wholly within St. Lucie County. This allows for clarity and more efficient provision of governmental services, including fire rescue and public safety services. This was one that we ended up putting a lot of work into this session, and so we were very happy that it eventually ended up crossing the finish line this year. The AB, well, what is now the A.B. Michael Bridge designation, the Wabasso Causeway was renamed the A.B. Michael Bridge after it was erroneously named the A.B. Mitchell Bridge back in the 1960s. This was actually, I think, the first thing that crossed my desk when I started working here, and it was quite interesting. I believe that the Department of Transportation accidentally named it A.B. Mitchell Bridge back in I believe 1963, and it is after very influential and prominent A.B. Michael.
You know how easy it is to make
yes.
that mistake? Yeah.
So whenever I say A.B. Mitchell, I like to italicize it like that just to point it out. Very influential person who is very involved in the citrus industry and in growing our community in this county. So that was an important designation, and it was quite interesting to explain to legislative staff and legislators why we needed this, and we determined that it was the best route to just go as if we were completely renaming the bridge, and also we have requested that FDOT erect signage reflecting the new designation. Other legislation, obviously we had the higher speed passenger rail legislation that's very important to this community. This bill received one hearing in the Senate, didn't gain any traction in the House. The bill was actually pared down to take out a lot of the technical language that was in the statute, in the proposed legislation, and direct FDOT to promulgate rules and to oversee this area. This one is obviously at the will of the board, something that could come back next year, and it's one where a lot of work goes into this, a lot of work goes into the drafting of it, and it's something that's pretty tough to get moving up there. We did see progress this year on this bill, I guess that hadn't been seen previously, and it's something that Senator Mayfield worked very, very hard on. A bill passed related to recycling contracts. This bill actually passed last year, but it had some plastic straw ban preemption language on it. That was kind of the poison pill, and it ended up being vetoed. So just the recycling contracts portion of that bill was passed this year by Representative Overdorf. This puts some new requirements on the language of our contracts with recycling companies. And so obviously we will be working through those new requirements. Short-term vacation rentals, once again, did not pass this year. Commissioner O'Brien went up to Tallahassee and testified on behalf of the county in opposition to this bill. It did start moving, and we thought that this might be the year that it did pass. And luckily, it was able to be fought off again. So I'm sure, as this one normally does, we'll probably see it again next year. But that was another win for us, and another year that the short-term vacation rentals bill was fought off. And what that would have done was completely preempt the regulation of short-term vacation rentals to the state. Obviously now we can only regulate at the local level in certain areas, but this would have completely taken away our ability to regulate. A bill related to impact fees did pass, and that allows for the transferability and portability of impact fees. So we are now working through any changes that need to go into place as a result of that bill. And then a bill related to growth management passed and was actually vetoed last week. This would have required some changes to our comprehensive plan, would have required a private property rights element in every comprehensive plan. This is one that will likely come back next year and pass. There was a poison pill that was put on this bill that angered some people, so that is why that one got vetoed. Looking ahead to next year we'll have a late session from March to May, beginning of March to beginning of May. I would expect that it will be heavy in COVID-19 related issues, whether that's substantive policy issues or obviously the results of a very constrained budget as a result of the state losing a significant portion of revenue from this year. So it'll be quite interesting. COVID-19 will most definitely be the theme in Tallahassee next year, and I'm sure that we will see legislation related to the authority of local governments to regulate during times of states of local emergencies, and also any other substantive policy proposals that have stemmed from issues that COVID-19 has brought. It'll also be post November 2020 elections, so the legislature could look a little bit different next year. I believe there are about 20 Senate seats that are up for election in the fall. So that will be interesting to see how the legislature looks post-elections. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank our legislative delegation, Senator Mayfield and Representative Grahl. They are very supportive of our issues, and they work very, very hard in Tallahassee to legislate on our behalf and to promote the issues that are most important to our community. And so I would ask the board to direct staff to prepare a letter of both thanks and also a letter to inform our delegation of the successes that we had, some areas that we'll be looking forward to next year, and also just to thank them for their support up in Tallahassee.
All right. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Zork.
And I think that the letter is a great idea, but since we did have significant help from St. Lucie County on the boundary adjustment, I think thanking them for their efforts on that as well would be appropriate.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, it's my understanding on the vacation rental bill that Governor DeSantis' office came out saying they weren't really excited about it. So I would add to the list a letter to the governor, because previously he has shown support for home rule, and I think a letter to him thanking him again for supporting home rule would be appropriate. And I want to put him on the spot a little bit here, but there's kind of an unsung hero here in the room. Former Senate President Ken Pruitt has been a strong ally for Indian River County up in Tallahassee. He works very quietly behind the scenes, but he is just been a very, very strong supporter for Indian River County. And so I'd just like to publicly acknowledge what Senator Pruitt has done for Indian River County. So thank you, Senator, appreciate it.
All right.
And one more thing, if I could add, Madam Chair. The Florida Association of Counties, their public policy proposal process is now open. The deadline to submit those policy proposals is August 14th. So if you need anything from me in that area, or if I can facilitate any type of policy proposals that you may have in your mind, please let me know.
Sounds good.
Madam Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we send appropriate letters to Senator Mayfield and Representative Grawl. In addition, a letter to St. Lucie County for their support on the boundary change, and to Governor DeSantis for preserving home rule.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Brian. All right, with that, we will move on to CARES Act, Proposed Spending Plan and Funding Agreement.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal legislature passed and the President signed some stimulus funds, including CARES Act dollars, which provided $150 billion in assistance to state and local governments. Of those funds, about $8 billion was allocated to the state of Florida or our local governments. The larger municipalities exceeding 500,000 received a direct allocation of about half of that amount. The state had about $4.5 billion, of which $1.3 billion has been now allocated for the smaller counties with populations under $500,000. So the county has received notification from the state that we are to receive CARES Act dollars, basically in two tranches. So our total allocation is just a little bit shy of $28 million. However, the the allocation that we have received so far is 25% of the total, or about $6.9 million. The agreement that you have before you today, the grant agreement, discusses that $6.9 million. There is no mention of the other $21 million. So the way that I believe we should treat this is that we've got the $6.9 million. We also found a lottery ticket on the ground. And if that's a winning ticket, we'll get another $21 million. And we hope to get additional information from the state on just exactly how that 75% will occur. Some of the best guidance we've gotten so far is that once we spend the first 25%, we'll submit that to DEM. They will validate that, and then pending their validation, review, approval of what we've done with the first 25%, they will potentially make the other 75% available to the counties. As you know, these funds have to be spent by December 30th, so there's a short fuse here. So that 25-75% split kind of makes that a more challenging dynamic to plan for. So today, we're basically presenting with you a basic allocation plan for your consideration, discussion, and eventual approval for the $7 million, and to get the authority for the chair to enter into the agreement with the state. So just a big picture breakdown. We were directed that we should share these funds with municipalities. To that effect, we have proposed sharing that with the municipalities on the formula that is used for the distribution of the half-cent sales tax and the 1-cent sales tax, which is a population-based distribution. That would provide a little over 27% to the municipalities, leaving about 73% for the county. Of that 73%, we have that broken into basically two groups. So first off, the overall allocation of the municipalities would be about $1.9 million. That would leave about $3 million for COVID response. That would be county BCC department expenses, constitutional officer expenses, We're also proposing to provide some funding to the health department and then other healthcare providers, as well as some responsibilities for state agencies such as court technology. As you've seen, the court system, they've been operating through Zoom and things like that. Our responsibility is to provide communications and technology to them. So we've made a small allocation for those expenses. And then we have allocated $2 million for community assistance, broken down into about $500,000 for economic development and $1.5 million for community support. So just talk a little bit more about the municipalities. You can see in the chart on the second page of the staff report, those allocations to the cities ranging from a low of about $15,000 for the town of Orchid to a high of a little over $900,000 for the city of Sebastian. What we would propose here is that we enter into sub-grant agreements with the municipalities. As those grants would be, we would provide basically a reimbursable grant to the municipalities. They would submit their expenses to us, and then we would reimburse those and then get reimbursed by the state. I will say that the state has a responsibility with the CARES Act dollars. If they're misappropriated or misallocated, they're responsible to the federal government, so they have basically, in their allocation to the counties, held us responsible for anything that goes wrong, which is completely understandable. So for that reason, we would like a similar arrangement with the municipalities. Also, would like to get basically a scope of work and a funding plan from the municipalities going through the process so that we know what their intentions are with the allocation so that we don't have disagreements a couple months from now once the cities have committed to something. Next, we've our constitutional officers from the sheriff's office to the others have incurred and we believe will incur significant payroll expenses related to COVID-19, PPE type expenses, some IT expenses as well. And those are the same types of things that we are seeing in our BCC departments, from technology expenses to beef up our ability for folks to do telework, to the frontline fire rescue employees that are responding to the folks that have been reassigned from their regular tasks to do COVID-related responsibilities. Next, we have recommended a $500,000 allocation to the health department to help them with their response from doing the testing and the contact tracing and all of those. They truly are the front line on this. They're the lead agency on coronavirus and want to make sure that they have the funding necessary to fulfill their function because a penny expended there can save many dollars down the road. There is the potential that they receive some additional allocations from the state, but there is lack of certainty on that at this point. So we want to make sure that they have the ability to commit and move forward on expenses. So recommending that allocation of $500,000 for the health department. Also recommending that we set aside $200,000 for other healthcare providers. This can be a combination of you are allowed to provide support to public hospitals with CARES Act dollars, and we could also contract with other healthcare providers for testing services, serological testing, things like that. So we're recommending an allocation of $200,000 for that. Talked about state agencies. And next we've got the community assistance, which is $2 million overall. Staff has proposed that we set aside $500,000 out of that $2 million for economic development, split into two subcategories, if you will. The first is to provide some job training grants through the Career Source agency. If you'll recall, back in the 2004 hurricanes, for instance, Career Source received some federal grant dollars to reemploy some dislocated workers. One of the a large portion of those workers were folks from Piper. They had a tornado destroy one of their manufacturing buildings and or their paint shop, I believe. And so hundreds of Piper workers were out of work. They were able to take those dollars, get those Piper workers back to work for other employers that needed those workers. So that's kind of a matchmaking service where where Career Source, and they've been doing this, they do this ongoing. They've got some other dollars here. We've got representatives from Career Source here to talk about this in more depth if you would like. And basically serve as like that temporary agency for an employer who needs employees, but in this case, the employer doesn't have to pay those employees because Career Source will be paying them with the dollars. Also some ability for some retraining to have workers change their job skills and support both the employers and the employees in that. We also have a portion that we would like to propose for a small business assistance program. We were fortunate enough to have the Chamber of Commerce talk to us and kind of share some ideas, and they provided a proposal as well that would provide a small business grant program for tourism-related industries. This could help impacted industries do marketing to tell people, hey, it's good to come back here to Indian River County, safe to come here and visit. And the group thought, and staff concurs, that it's best to drive those at those most impacted businesses. As nothing wrong with manufacturing, but for instance, there were businesses that may not have been as impacted by COVID as others that were able to get funding assistance under the PPP. Not saying that the PPP is a bad thing, but just kind of trying to target that. We're trying to supplement and augment the PPP program and not duplicate that. So Dory Stone and Helene Castlestein are here to talk about that in more detail, if you would like. The other $1.5 million staff is proposing for community support. Got a couple of different lanes that we're looking at there. Food and feeding assistance programs, such as food banks and soup kitchens. We have talked to the Treasure Coast Food Bank, who has representatives here. Staff's ideas that we might be able to provide one central repository for that type of assistance, and my understanding is they have relationships with the soup kitchens and all those other feeding agencies, that they could be the central repository for this, and provide that kind of the pass-through for all of the agencies. Similarly, United Way, who Michael Kenna is also here, I would propose we could utilize them to provide many of the other support programs and help, because they've got a committee that is well-equipped and practiced to disperse dollars on an unmet needs basis. Some of the programs that some of the needs they've looked at and mentioned are expenses for providing mental health support. I think that's one of the issues that has probably not been adequately addressed with a lot of the things that have been going on with coronavirus. People being, kind of locked at home, people losing jobs, going through we're all under a little bit more stress following COVID-19, and I believe there's some additional assistance that might be needed for folks from a mental health standpoint. Also heard from some of the providers that they have folks who may have lost a job, and that with that job they lost their health insurance, so they don't have the funds to procure the mental health services that they might need. So definitely a need there. United Way, and again, all these folks that are here can talk far more eloquently than I can about the programs, but I just kind of want to lay out some of the big picture ideas. Talked about expansion of broadband services and assistance to some folks, particularly one of the needs that they've seen was with the remote learning. A lot of the families may not have had adequate broadband or adequate equipment at home to really participate in distance learning, and there are a lot of things up in the air about the way school's going to look in the fall, but that might be a potential thing to do there. Also had some discussions, and there's a proposal in the backup from Senior Resource Association. They have some increased needs in their Meals on Wheels program, which is a very good program during regular times, but is especially necessary now. And something that kind of adds on to that, some senior citizens and vulnerable population may be reluctant to go to the grocery store, and don't want to get exposed to what they may get exposed to at the grocery store or do their shopping. So they have been running a shopping assistance program where the folks provide their shopping list, and then the SRA representatives go and do the shopping, and then the folks pay for their groceries. But that accomplishes a couple of things. There are some private providers that do this, but they charge a fee, and there might be some technology challenges there. So that seems like a good way to expend some of these dollars for a benefit that will maybe, if that has the ability to A, make those folks feel more comfortable, and B, allow them to reduce their exposure, then thus, potentially having fewer elderly and vulnerable population folks become infected. I think that may be a worthwhile venture. There have been all kinds of other programs that have been provided out there, like assistance with utility costs, prescription medicine costs, rental assistance, and housing payment assistance, assistance to homeless services. Don't have specific programs recommended here today, but just want to bring that up and mention that. I will say some of the other counties some of the larger counties that are ahead of us on this journey, they got their money 2 months ago, have done some direct assistance, like $1,000 stimulus. In some places, I don't know if that's a good fit for us or not, but just want to mention that is something that has been provided, and there have been some rental assistance type programs or mortgage payment assistance programs for people impacted by COVID. The same thing with utilities. I will say that the county has a relatively small amount of dollars set aside for grocery, prescription, utility assistance each year. I will say there may be some access issues there, but we have not exactly been overwhelmed with that in our local program that we have. So I don't know what that means for the overall need there. And again, these are just the general broad categories. Wanted to put these ideas out there, get some further direction from the board on if you think that this proposed general allocation makes sense. Open to hearing any input that you have on how we should prioritize these dollars, which of the programs you think make sense. If any don't make sense, or others that aren't listed here, welcome your support or your input, and would recommend that the board provide any of that input and make adjustments to the overall allocation as necessary, and approve a general distribution plan, as well as authorizing the chair to enter into the agreement with the state. I will say that staff would plan to come back with sub-grant agreement amounts and awards to individual agencies at a future date, possibly as early as next week, because we do have a short fuse on this, and we want to try and get that done sooner rather than later, so that we don't have to wait until August to enter into agreements with these agencies. Maybe need for a special call if we're not able to make next week on that. A lot of talking here, but want to say that we do have, as many of the folks that know a lot more about these programs and can speak better about how they might work, and we could work out some of the details as we go forward. So with that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Yes, Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, have you been in contact with the city managers on all this?
Yes, we talked to them early on. We've provided them the information on the CARES Act, including the eligible expenditures, provided them the proposed distribution for each of them. Feedback has been positive from them, and provided them a copy of this agenda item last week.
So the only concern I have, because we have such a short deadline, do we need to give the cities a deadline to submit their plan? I don't want them dragging this out for a couple months, and then, so it might be something we want to look at, say, okay, we need your plan by such and such date. If we don't have a valid approved plan, then those monies roll back into what we're doing on the county side, just to make sure these funds get spent quickly in the community and things like that. Secondly, on the school districts, I talked to Jason about this, and if they do go to bricks and mortars, I think they're gonna need some kind of scanning equipment that can rapidly measure the temperatures of a lot of people very quickly. And if the school districts aren't getting any CARES fund directly, I think, like maybe 100,000 or something for that equipment. Jason has said that the county's looked at this equipment, so it's available, but I think that would help increase the safety in the schools if they go back to brick and mortar operation. And then on some of the other grants and such, even though it's expiring, the state unemployment weekly pay, from my understanding, is probably very low compared nationally, but they're also getting the $600 a week from the federal unemployment, and a lot of people are making more money now by not working than working. So my only point would be, if we do have some of these grants where we're reimbursing people for lost payroll or things like that, that we get some type of work product out of them, be it, cleaning up trash on the highways or painting county buildings, but I don't like the fact to just keep giving money to people for them to sit at home and do nothing. So if we could get some kind of value at however those grants are set up, I would prefer to see that, so that at least we're getting some kind of work product out of them. So I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Solari?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few things. First of all, I'd like to thank Jason and his staff, because I think he's done a very good job with all of this. And I think we probably need to understand that this is a very moving target. I mean, the things that we think we know today, we don't, and we don't know what's going to come up in the next week. Given that, I think I'm mostly just interested in some general sort of guidelines. One is, I think Jason's on the absolute right track with the idea of the discipline of an arrangement with the municipalities, and that should go to the nonprofits and any other partners we have in this, that we have the discipline of an agreement. I think that now is a time to understand that we have partners that we've been working with for a long time, and now is probably the time to utilize them, because we don't have time to vet new people and put out RFPs and things like that. So I think Jason's on the right track with talking about working with people, groups like the United Way, Senior Resources, and other nonprofits that are embedded in the community, and people like the Chamber of Commerce. I think that generally we need to have that reasonable and meaningful nexus to the COVID-19 virus. That's appropriate, and Jason's on the right track with that. As specific of anything as I'd like to get is the idea of working harder on things like testing and other tasks which might have a tendency to build the confidence of our members of our community. And again, I don't know exactly what those are, aside from perhaps testing, but if Jason can just keep his eye out for that, and that would be a direction which I would find very positive. And with that, again, I just want to thank Jason. I know he's taking this very seriously and working very hard to do the right thing, and I think that our citizens are benefiting from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zork, did you?
Just echoing this comments from Commissioner Solari and O'Brien, they've covered it pretty well.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher, did you have anything you wanted? All right. Do you need?
I'd be happy to make a motion to allow the chair to enter into an agreement with the state on this, and to further direct the county administrator to make sure that the municipalities know that they've got a deadline to work with, and just broadly say that the board commends the actions of the county administrator, and just would like the normal chains of communication to remain open.
Second as it stands.
And just, Commissioner Solari, does that include the approval of the tentative outline of how the funds are distributed that's been presented today? Okay, great.
Okay, so that is a motion by Commissioner Solari with a second by Commissioner Fletcher. Is there any discussion from the board? Anybody from the public? No? All right. With that then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'd just like to thank our community partners that are helping us with this as well. We appreciate that.
And Madam Chair, if it doesn't come back on the 14th, we have to have a special call meeting. could it not be the last Wednesday and Thursday in July?
So noted.
Mini season.
That is lobster mini season, and
Okay,
that's,
we'll do our best to work
I
around
just want to
that.
get that out there right now.
The important things, I get it.
You know, that's really good social isolation when you're out there in the middle of the ocean, so I'm
Yeah,
doing my part.
We appreciate that.
Will there be any things brought back from that?
You know, you can never guarantee that, Commissioner. It's,
He has a tradition of being a little tight with that.
hey, everybody's getting pineapples, come on.
I say conservative.
No, it might help get the date that you want for the special call.
Oh, boy.
Conversion rate.
All right. Okay, so then, let's see. So then we will move on to county attorney's matters. City of Vero Beach Water, Wastewater, and Reclaimed Water Franchise Agreement.
Thank you very much. In 2011, Indian River County gave notice of its intention not to renew the water and sewer franchises with the city of Vero Beach. That was set to expire on March 4th, 2017. Those franchises did expire.
Sorry.
Those franchises did expire, and the city has continued to serve the unincorporated areas that were in their area at county rates without the surcharge and with a 6% franchise fee. The county and city staff has had on and off again sort of negotiations on a new franchise agreement, but those negotiations have stalled. I must admit that for a period of time, staff from the city and staff from the county had both set aside our negotiations in order to work more focused on the FPL sale. Just simply now, just looking to the board to authorize the county attorney's office to see if we can attend the July 21st city council meeting in order to gauge the interest of the city council in continuing moving forward with the franchise agreement discussions, and hopefully lock in what the city council's already been doing as part of a long-term agreement. I'd be happy to get an understanding from the city council as to where they are on where we, how we, move forward with these agreements and these discussions. It's my understanding that the city council, or at least city staff, has reached out and hired the law firm of Gray Robinson to assist them in this matter. That's fine. I'm happy to work with Gray Robinson as well, but just simply trying to move this ball forward, and thus figured going to the city council meeting on the 21st might be the best way to continue this, to continue the negotiations. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair and the board for any questions.
Thank you, Dylan. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Be happy to move staff recommendation.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Solari with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we will move on to Solid Waste Disposal District.
Move the minutes of the meeting of March 3rd, April 7th, April 23rd, and May 5th.
Second?
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Solari with a second by Commissioner Zork. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is CCNA 2018 Amendment Number 1 to Work Order Number 32 to Kimley Horn, blah, blah. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Himanshu Mehta, Solid Waste Disposal District. And in front of you today is the amendment to Kimley Horn. And we're looking at improving our household hazardous waste facility and our recycling transfer facility. So looking at our existing household hazardous waste facility, I know many of you have been out to our facility. This is 20 years old. It's you know, on the left-hand side is kind of the aerial view. It just shows you from the top. That's kind of our facility. On the bottom picture there on the right is where residents basically drop things off. It's kind of, you know, just kind of like a convenience center type there. Again, 20 years old. The HHW Republic Services operates that on our behalf, and all the materials are safely stored behind that fence area underneath that roof canopy there. And then used oil is on the right-hand side on the top right picture there. The little shed that we have is where we have used oil. So one of the things we're looking to do is to kind of make some improvements. Now, in terms of single-stream recycling facility, we have sort of outdoor cardboard bays, and those concrete walls have collapsed and become unsafe. We have an old, what used to be a styrofoam receiving building on the right-hand side. That was knocked down Hurricane Irma, and so we've had plans of trying to tearing that facility down. We're actually out to bid right now for demolishing these old structures and whatnot. So we're looking to open the bids next week for that. And the plan is this fiscal year to go ahead and get some prep work done on removing some of these old structures. The bottom picture is our Big Top tent. That's our current single stream transfer facility. As you can see, we're basically exceeding our capacity there. Prior to going to single stream, we were about like 12,000, barely making 12,000 tons a year. We're over 20,000 tons, 22,000 tons a year. So our single stream program, when we built this in 2015, the idea was this was just going to be a stepping stone to get some more permanent thing. As you can see, even in that picture, this is a fabric on top of this structure. Every hurricane, a potential hurricane that comes through, we spend funds to remove that tarp and then put it back on. And so last 5 years, there's been a lot of wear and tear, if you will, and doing patches to kind of repair the fabric. But the idea is to kind of modernize our facility. So we had a work authorization with Kimley Horn to kind of look at some conceptual level design at this point. And the board approved that work order, the original work order 32 on April 7th. It was for $48,400. And one of the things we also did is we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. So we started looking around at other facilities. We took a trip up to Sarno, up in Brevard County. This is a facility that they built in 2012, 2013. Today's dollars is a little around $1.1 million is what they spent here. And as you can see on the top left, just a better traffic flow for residents. When they come in, they can drive sort of protected from the environment and have a safe spot to kind of unload some of their materials. And they're something unique that they've done that they say is very successful. They actually have a little swap shop area where residents can come in, and if they wanted to take some old paint cans or things like that, and they track them, they check licenses and things like that. So nothing right now during COVID or anything like that, but this is more 18, 24 months kind of out, but that's been a successful way to get repurpose and reutilize some of the materials. So Kimley Horn, as part of the current authorization, they started looking at our facility, and I know the left is a little busy, but we're trying to come up with a pattern of traffic flow to kind of bring residents in, trying to think about the possibility of future expansions as well. So that's why kind of the traffic is being sort of diverted. To the north is our scale house, so they would basically come around, come into a covered drop-off area, which is check about 1,500 to 2,000 square foot area that they can drive in. We're looking at Republic Services there to kind of help the residents if they need it. Then an open area, just kind of like the Sarno facility. We're looking at an integrated facility. So the HHW facility would be there, about 8,000 square feet of an open air type of a thing, just like Sarno. And then behind that, we'd have about 3,200 square foot of storage areas for things and materials as well, chemical storage. And then just to the south of that would be our recycling transfer facility. And that is looking at a 15,000 square foot recycling facility. And the area down below to the south conceptually is just in the future, if we need to expand the facility, we have room to be able to kind of do that. And just to point out, it's a future concept for future budget plans in the outer years. The area to the west of the recycling facility, we're potentially thinking that could be, there's enough room there to almost have the residential drop-off area, maybe an elevated area. A lot of folks that come in there, they don't want to go up into the top of the landfill. And so even, the containers we have on the ground, a lot of folks have a hard time lifting things in there. So kind of like some of our convenience centers, just a little bit of an elevated area like we have at Oslo. that they can drop off their garbage and C&D materials. Just, Kimley Horn and their artist rendering and whatnot, just kind of looking at some of the conceptual improvements. One of the things to try to reduce, instead of having a high cost in curb and gutter and whatnot, is they've thrown a lot of landscaping in just to guide the traffic rather than people cutting around where they try to kind of do a little bit of that. The picture on the right is what I was talking about, is the covered area where residents would drive underneath the canopy area to be able to drop things off safely. And so just a preliminary looking at these conceptual sizes. We no detailed design has been done yet. That's what the authorization today for the amendment is. But conceptual level cost, $2.5 to $3 million for both the HHW improvements and the single stream transfer facility. Once we go through a detailed design over the next few months, we'll get a better, an updated opinion of probable cost, and then certainly we're going to do a competitive bid process. And as I mentioned earlier, the demolition of existing structures, that's currently out to bid, and we're looking to get that all done. We do have, between the capital funds this year and what we're rolling into next year, about sort of $2.5 million slated. We'll have to take a look at when we come back for bid award as to what it is. The facility, the buildings themselves are within sort of what we had anticipated budget-wise. It's just that when you try to plan out the infrastructure improvements and the traffic flow patterns and trying to plan for future, that's what's resulting in some of these additional costs. So it's not the actual buildings that potentially could be in that $3 million range. It's kind of looking at some of the other improvements that you'll have to do. We saw at the Sarno facility there was a bathroom facility there as well, so that's something that we're looking at. We'll have to look at some of the building codes. The thing about a size of this facility is you're going to have a sprinkler system in there. We don't have any sprinkler system in our big top tent right now. So those are things that to make it modern and with code that will add to some of the cost. But we feel like that this will be a huge improvement to our facility and a benefit to our residents. So the recommendation is to approve the CCNA 2018 Amendment Number 1 to Work Order 32 with Kimley Horn in the amount of $206,910 to provide engineering services for the HHW and recycling facility design, permitting, and bidding services, and to authorize the chairman to execute. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Are there any questions, commissioners?
Just, Himanshu, it looked like there's an awful lot of lawn there. Are we also looking at any additional maintenance costs for mowing and all that stuff?
We certainly will have to discuss that with Republic Services. Part of our entire landfill footprint, the maintenance and the mowing of all that is part of their contract. But yeah, if we do add some additional lawn area, they would have to take a look at that, and we'll have to see.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Seeing none,
Move staff recommendation.
Second, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the next item is the solid waste disposal rate survey.
Good morning again. Himanshu Mehta, Solid Waste Disposal District. We utilize Kessler Consulting, and as you can imagine with COVID and whatnot, both Kimley Horn and Kessler Consulting staff wanted to be here or participate. They may be on YouTube Live, but due to travel restrictions and whatnot, they couldn't be here. So Chaz Jordan helped kind of put this together as well. And our Solid Waste Disposal District, as you know, is an enterprise fund, and there are two principal areas of our funding source, the tipping fees that we collect at the landfill and the non-ad valorem assessment that we have on improved residential and commercial properties. And our tipping fees at the landfill were set in 1995. So we have about 25 years ago is kind of when those rates were established. There were some updates and clarifications that we've had over those 25 years, but those tipping rates have now been adjusted in that period of time. And as I'll show you later on, one of the ways that we've been sort of adjusting for the growing increase in cost is modifying the assessment rate annually. And And so what we wanted to do is we issued a purchase order to Kessler Consulting for $10,000 to kind of help us do a preliminary tipping fee rate survey. It was more of a desktop exercise, looking at other counties, and what they looked at is about 10 other counties in the state, some of our neighbors to the north and south, looking at similar populations and scope of services, looking at publicly owned landfills or transfer stations is kind of what they looked at in this analysis. And just graphically show you, these are the 10 counties that they were looking at, as I mentioned. Certainly our neighbors to the north, Volusia, Brevard, and then to south, St. Lucie, Martin, Palm Beach. Also looked at some coastal communities on the west coast as well. And this is a busy slide, but I just want to kind of just mention, you know, every county is unique. Every county has a different type of a collection program. We're kind of taking a look at the population ranges, you know, compared to us to some of the other counties. And, you know, a lot of them are not like we are. You know, we have a voluntary assessment program, voluntary collection program for garbage collection. A lot of places have on their assessment a mandatory collection for garbage. So some of how their funding sources differ compared to ours, but nevertheless, they have tipping at their scale house. So what Kessler Consulting did was to kind of look at our fee structure and evaluate other counties' tip fees. And I want to just kind of highlight, I mean, there was a detailed report in the staff report and what was presented, but just kind of highlight some of the main things and key observations. The county C&D disposal rate is $31.80, and it's below the average of all the counties surveyed. So we're looking at about $41.53 across. And as you can see, I just kind of highlighted Indian River there in red, looking at just some of our neighbors. Martin County is at $42 a ton, St. Lucie, about the same price, about 32, and then Brevard, a little lower actually at 24. But sometimes, you know, they subsidize that with their assessment program on their non-development assessment. So we do realize that across looking at all these counties, we are below in terms of the overall average. Only two counties have a lower rate for clean concrete, both which accepted at no charge, and over 50% of the counties surveyed did not distinguish between clean concrete and C&D. So right now we charge like $3 a ton for clean concrete. It's a good way to separate it. It helps out some of the contractors that take the time to separate that out. However, when you compare $3 to $30, where other counties are not even distinguished from that, is that if you bring in concrete, which weighs a lot, it certainly is how they're able to fund some of their operations. We also have the lowest rate for out-of-county waste at $60 a ton. And Martin County did not distinguish between in-county or out-county. Manatee County charges 3 times as much for out-of-county waste. So as much as we, you know, like our neighbors and whatnot, one of the things that we don't want is our residents subsidizing waste from out-of-county. And so that was a kind of an observation we wanted to point out, that certainly, you know, we don't have a mechanism where we're checking licenses when they come to our scale house. So we're assuming that, you know, most of the folks that are coming in are from in-county, but if we have people that are crossing boundaries, it's very hard to police. The other thing to mention is yard waste. No other county surveyed accepted yard waste at no cost. And 50% of the county survey made no distinction between land clearing and yard waste. So majority of the material that comes into our facility that's collected, say, by Waste Management or at the convenience centers, or even when mom and pop come in, if it's less than 3 inches in diameter, it comes in for free. And we certainly have our costs with the operation with Atlas Organics. When we do have what we consider land clearing or anything over 3 inches in diameter, our rate is $22 a ton. As you can see, kind of the average across is about $36 a ton, and some don't even make a distinction. If you come into the scale house at other landfills, you pay these rates. And I want to point out St. Lucie County, $45 a ton. They just recently, a couple of years ago, made that jump. And so if you're just you know, beyond the border in St. Lucie County, and you're looking at going all the way to the St. Lucie landfill, paying $45 a ton, or coming to our facility for $22, you know, you can imagine a lot of the contractors will probably cross the border, and it's hard to tell between land clearing from St. Lucie versus ours. So that was certainly an eye-opener in terms of what's going on. Brevard is at $40. Martin is just a little higher at 24. So our rates for various disposal types are generally lower than other counties that are in the same size and scope and provide the same scope of services. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted to kind of show you, you know, where we as staff would like to head with this. KCI had mentioned in the report, maybe at this time, doing something with our yard waste rates and trying to increase them at this time. Speaking with the county administrator and the budget director, we want to do a full assessment for the board, for our residents. And so when we look at the tipping rates, and even though they may be lower than other counties right now, we don't want to just make a recommendation to just increase something at the scale house. We want to take a look at the full picture. And this is how we've managed, if you will, our two buckets, and where our rates at the scale house have remained the same for 25 years. As you can see, our assessment rates have gradually gone up. Now, 2015 was a big jump for us when we went to single stream carded service. So that was an increase. Nevertheless, though, our expenses continue to go up. There's a, you know, majority of our services are privatized, so there's built-in CPI in our contracts. And so we've utilized the assessment program for improved residential and commercial properties to balance our budget, if you will. So I wanted to kind of point that out. So the next step is what we're recommending is to do a full review of the methodology, the generation rates used in determining the current assessment percentages, again, that were set very, very long time ago. Back in 1995, they actually did waste sort of audits and compositions of different commercial sectors. So you'd go to a restaurant and take a look at what they're generating in terms of their trash. Are they doing any sort of recycling and whatnot? So we feel like due to a lot of increased waste diversion, recycling efforts, there's a lot of changes in the processing of how materials are handled these days, and that we're long overdue in taking a look at what some of these generation rates are at various commercial sectors throughout the county. And so we're not prepared today, but we wanted to just get board direction to direct staff to bring back a proposal for a full solid waste rate analysis, where we'd be looking at the residential and commercial assessment program, along with what we've done today here so far with the rate analysis at the scale house, and then come back to you with an approval to move forward with that. And then we're hoping that by next budget cycle, that prior to the next budget cycle, we would be able to bring back to you a report that would take a look at and how we would maybe gradually make some adjustments in the way we operate our enterprise fund. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the clean concrete, Himanshu, do we have much of a contamination issue with that, or are the contractors doing a pretty good job of just bringing in clean material?
Most of them do a good job. One of the challenges we face is that they like to hide some things. So, you know, it's just human nature if you're out there working and whatnot, and I can just throw, you know, my water bottle in there, and I'll throw in, you know, some of my trash in there and here and there. So for the most part, they do a good job. What we noticed is we recently, when we were doing the yard waste improvement project, we were crushing our own concrete on site. And so when we had the contractor on site and the guys were coming up, they started, you know, he was watching them, and they started cleaning up the act. And we basically had to put a notice on our scale house that, hey, if you have any trash, you're going to get charged like a $25 contamination fee. So that's what we were, you know, when we started watching every load come in. Now what we do right now is Republic Services, the scale house will call their staff to go, when they say somebody's coming with clean concrete, to go dump. Republic will attempt to go out there and meet them. But timing of that is always a challenge. So overall, they're doing good, but a a lot of times we do run into folks that will throw other things in there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Solari.
A couple things. One is, I'm perfectly happy to support going ahead with the review, perfectly happy for out-of-county waste to be charged full cost. I have no reason to have Indian River County subsidize others. And basically, with only one exception, happy to see any rates adjusted. The one exception right now that I'd have would be a charge for yard trash. Happy to see a charge for land clearing, because that's really a commercial activity. With the yard trash, I'm worried about a couple things. One, particularly dumping, and two, the idea that, to me, yard trash is related to TMDL remediation, and I'm worried that less will be brought back and reused in other things. I mean, we pay a lot for recycling, we pay a lot for remediating nitrogen and phosphorus, and I'd hate to do something which would increase the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. And so those are my only comments and my only major concern.
Yes, Commissioner
What-
Zark.
On those same lines, would you want to put under yard waste, a volume limitation of the vehicle of, if somebody's bringing in an 18-yard waste, it's more of a commercial operation than a homeowner activity, doing storm prep or cutbacks and those things, but that's, well, if
It's
you have any-
something we can look at. I wasn't leaning towards some sort of a volume type of an approach. It's,
that's fine.
one of the challenges we run into is when you say, less than 3 inches is free, is a lot of folks will hide the big stuff underneath all the little stuff. And so, we Scale House, the ladies have been working there for many years. They can tell when a load is heavy. They communicate back with Atlas Organics, and they'll have the load checked, and they'll call back and say, yeah, it's heavy. I mean, so that's one area where we feel like, a good percentage of our yard waste and land clearing is coming in for free. And if we were to sort of equalize and have a way to sort of balance out the yard waste tipping fee so that everybody's charged something for all the material, the only exception we would have to figure out how to do is with the yard waste collected by, say, Waste Management currently and at the convenience centers. So if there was a way that you would continue the assessment program and have some part of the assessment cover the residential yard waste, however, everything else coming in, just apply a tipping rate. Because as I mentioned earlier, when you have, no way to distinct between a load coming from St. Lucie County versus Indian River, and when it's, $22 here and $45 across county line, it's easy for them to just come across and come to our facility and pay the 22. They're happy to pay the 22.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions, or concerns? If not,
Go ahead and move staff recommendation to approve the survey.
we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, and if there is nothing else for the good of the order, then we stand adjourned.